Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Today's show is Agentic AI Enhanced Sales Strategy. And I'm going to do something a little bit different. I co-host another show called In the Hot Seat. It's a live show. And we did an episode today, Pete Smith and I. So Pete's the founder and CEO of SpotLogic, and a company that I've worked with, and Pete I've worked with a bit as well, and I'm on the board, I should say. So anyway, Pete and I discuss the use of AI in sales, in a sales strategy, and it's a process based on a process that I built a few years ago, actually, in collaboration with him and some others. But anyway, the idea was, to talk about it in the context of today with AI as it can enable different parts of the sales process. I think you'll enjoy that. But before I play that replay, I also wanted to announce, and you've heard me talk about this for a little while now, I guess, because I've certainly been excited about it. Finally, the book, Building a Digital Workforce, Strategies for Agentic AI Success, will be released next week, so September 15th. And if you want to pre-order, you can pre-order now on Amazon, the Kindle version. You can also go to yourdigitalworkforce.com, which is the book's website, and you can click the link there and pre-order as well. Definitely would appreciate that. The book will also be available for those of you who don't really like the digital experience. You want to put your hands on a book. You can do that. It'll be available in both paperback and hardback on Amazon, and also through another distributor at several other booksellers worldwide. So hopefully you can check that out, and certainly if you want pre-order, would definitely appreciate that. But anyway, let's get to the recording. So just stand by, and here's the recording of the In the Hot Seat episode from today.
Welcome, everyone, to In the Hot Seat. I'm Pete Smith, the CEO of SpotLogic. And for our repeat viewers, thank you for joining us again. For those new to the show, every 2 weeks, we put industry experts like Michael or customers into the hot seat for a lively discussion, debate, even some discourse as we seek to humanize the digital experience, which is in high demand today. Right. And in fact, that's what we're going to talk about is agentic AI in the role of enterprise sales. And fresh off the release of his new book on agentic AI, we have Michael Fauscette, who knows more about this stuff than anybody else we could find out there. So welcome, Michael.
But I'm also a co-host, so it's to flip the mic, and that means you didn't look very far.
So. No, we didn't put a lot of effort into it. And as usual, our little video in the beginning of the show is always the highlight of the show. So you've already seen the best part of this.
Well, no, the closing video.
Oh, that's really cool, even better. You're right.
So you got something to look for. If I'm just saying.
You could just make it through the next 40 minutes or so, then
exactly
you can see that little 30-second tidbit. Okay, super. So as a salesperson, I'm interested in the whole agentic thing is really interesting to me because salespeople don't like to use tools. So if we can take some work off of their plate, that's you've got their interest automatically. Yeah. But I think that agentic is focused on doing more than just the menial tasks, and maybe that's where we should spend at least some of our time talking about. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about your book and what you covered in that to start with, and we can go from there.
Yeah, sure. So I've been working on it for almost a year, I guess. A book on agentic AI. It's called "Building a Digital Workforce: Strategies for Agentic AI Success." And my idea was, as I talked to more and more companies that were, trying this, you read more studies about companies that had tried it and kind of doom and gloom around it. And frankly, when I started this, almost a year ago, we were just in that weird time. We were moving from just talking about generative to actually talking about agentic, which is built on top of the technology that we learned and other things as well. Um, but it's different in considerably, many ways, I guess, and particularly moving towards automation. And so I wanted to build something that was more like a framework or a guidebook, so that if I'm a business person and I'm trying to figure out what the hell to do with this, I can I could look through and kind of go through in a structured way. And one of the things that, and we'll talk about this some, I guess, in the context of the diagram and some other things that I've done. But one of the biggest things was that I've saw us do what we almost always do when there's new technology. We focused a whole bunch on the technology and we didn't look at the people at all. And so most of what I could see from failures, and even some of the doom and gloom failures that have come out, either were companies that were really using generative AI, which has some interesting issues about ROI and what you can do with it, et cetera. And I think the expectations were probably set too high for generative. And then, I've started to look at this new thing that wasn't just a tool, but it was more like a companion, a digital worker. And we're still trying to treat it like a tool. And so I feel like a lot of that, was kind of missing the point and not really moving towards use cases that would provide a lot of value. And that's particularly true of generative because, again, there are a lot of valuable use cases, but it's not going to increase everybody's productivity by 10, X. And I ran across companies and people that were telling me, well, yeah, my boss loved this. He raised you know, my goals by 10 or something. And I mean, of course it failed because it didn't take into account any of the other things around it or the people too. So anyway, that's kind of how I started with the book, and the book's ready and going to be launched actually next week. It's available for pre-order, and and then the context of this topic is, which but I'll share with the audience, was an enterprise sales strategy that you and I had talked about for a while, and I had kind of evolved from your technology, your tools at SpotLogic made me start to rethink. And as you know, I've done survey after survey on buyers, and buyers were pretty much telling us that we weren't selling them the way they wanted to be sold to. And that had been going on for years. I mean, I think the first time I did that survey was like 2014. So, we didn't learn a lot, and we have been kind of going down this path of a linear approach to a sales process, and it's just not that way anymore. And we made a lot of assumptions around information and kind of in the days when we used to think companies could control what was put out there about them and about their solutions and about the problems. We know that hadn't been true in many, 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 many years. So that's kind of how we got to it. And actually, if you want, I'll put this first version up, because I think this is kind of an interesting way to frame some of the rest of the discussion around sales. But this is what it looked like before I added AI in any real way to the process. But it is a change from what we saw in the past.
Right. So this is where you and I are sort of hand in glove on the way that we look at the way to be successful in enterprise or complex sales.
Mhm.
I think we need to treat simplistic sales completely differently, and so we should just focus on that place where you've got to establish the value with the customer, and
Mhm.
really my experience um, I've always been in that space, and my experience is always that once they sort of narrow in on a product, or at least what could be a a good choice for them, they then shift into, or if they haven't already, the company itself. Is this the company I want to go down this road with? Because it's not about just making some decision. We've got to then implement it, and we've got to get that ROI that we were planning on getting, and we promised up the food chain. And I think that's a lot of what your book is about. So the sort of the conclusion I came to was that, understanding the customer is really the thing that needs to be done that isn't being done, to the degree that it needs to be. You've got to reach that sort of critical mass of understanding about the customer so that you're even in a position to create value and build trust. You can't do either one of those things
Yeah.
if you don't understand the customer. And the other thing
Yeah.
that I've gotten a new appreciation for is that it's a race. Like, if I'm a buyer, I don't have time to deal with umpteen sales reps. So I'm trying to figure out who's got my interests in mind and who
Mhm.
wants to understand my business, and then I'm going to spend more time with that person. So you talk about engagement. I'm going to spend more time with the person who is actually cares about making me successful, as opposed to running through some linear sales process like you just mentioned.
Yeah. And I think too, for years, it's easy as a technology focused company or person, to focus on what we're trying to do instead of what the customer's trying to do or the prospect. Right. And that I think is a real, kind of fundamental foundation for all of this idea of rethinking the fact that it's not linear, and that people come in with a problem and they're trying to figure out how to solve the problem. And when I was the chief research officer at G2, the first time we had built out the kind of the way to navigate the site, it was really focused around products, which is again a logical way to think of technology, but not a logical way if you're a customer or prospect trying to solve a problem.
Right.
And so I feel like this process and this map, basically a strategy, helps you kind of go, okay, I want to understand the problem. I want to show them how I could solve that problem. I want to build value. And by doing that, I build trust, and can become that trusted, advisor, and collaborate on the solution set that solves that prospect's problem. And that's a winning approach.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's the approach that like you're either in that game, given the fact that AI is going to just, hey Siri, get me 50 more of those servers I always buy from Dell. I don't need a salesperson for that,
Right.
right? And I think the other thing that's another part of your research that's so fundamental to this whole thing is, I mean, not only has it would be great to have a series, a sort of time series analysis of how this has changed since Siebel, let alone
Yeah.
Salesforce. But like how far has CRM taken the sales organization's eye off the ball in terms of understanding the customer and their needs and putting the customer first? Because back before CRM, that's all we had to do was think about the customer, right? And the product didn't change for 5 or 6 years. Right? So it wasn't
Yeah.
like we had to
Yeah.
spend a lot of time understanding that, right? So
Yeah.
so anyway, with the rate of change now, it's a whole different ball game. And
Yeah, well,
it's
it was
fun stuff.
fundamentally a different game. You're right, and it's funny you say the Siebel thing. When I was at PeopleSoft in the mid to late '90s, '98, I think it was. I was a part of the team that helped him buy Vantiv, which was another CRM company that was kind of their answer to what was evolving around Siebel. And at the time, we were really focused more on making the managers and the CFO and executives happy. We weren't really
Right.
back then thinking about how do I make the salesperson more effective, and that I think we missed for years. And my joke, and you've heard me say this many times, that the sales tech world over the last 15 years has just invested in trying to make things that don't work go faster and more. Right. So if 100 cold calls don't work, let me do 1,000. If 1,000 doesn't work, let me do 10,000. Like, at some point, you top out, and that's not the right approach anymore. You got to step back and go, hey, what we're doing isn't working,
Well,
and we have to do something fundamentally different.
and that ties back to your research of, now it's this year it's last year it's 67, this year it's 68% of software
Mhm.
buyers or buyers in general, technology buyers,
Yep.
uh, refuse to talk to a salesperson until they've already made a decision. And that's an existential threat to the profession of sales,
Yeah.
right? If people don't want to talk to you,
Yeah.
and I think the point is that if you're not creating any value, why would they,
Correct.
right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, they think of you as the place where they place the order, so you're the order counter, like, I go into Burger King and I decide I want an Impossible Whopper, and then I step up to the counter and tell the person to get me one. That's completely different from the way that salespeople think of it, right? That I'm trying to work with you to help you solve a problem by positioning my solution in front of you in a way that makes it, obvious that there's value there.
yeah.
I'm going to take a quick break here. I just got to say thank you. And the good news is, as an author, it means I sold one. Sorry.
One down, 33 million to go here in the United States.
Exactly. Exactly. We're on the
There's
way to the
330
bestseller.
million.
Anyway, all right. Let me pop this into the agentic mode there. Okay. Or the AI enhanced mode, I should say. Any of those little dotted lines, those are places where you have use cases that you could apply some form of AI. A lot of this is, a combination of agentic and some machine learning and some of the more traditional AIs, but nonetheless, there is a good bit of opportunity across this whole concept of places that we could apply and get a lot of value out of AI.
Yep. As I looked at these earlier today, um, the thing that struck me was that we can there are things that are things that salespeople just don't have enough time to do. I mean, time is the
Yeah.
scarcest resource, right? So understanding how your prospective clients are interacting with the internet is something you just don't have time to do
Right.
as a serious salesperson. If that's all you're doing is looking at the internet to see what Bill posted, like you're not doing the other 99.99% of the job. And so
Correct.
having and there's things that automation can do incredibly well like that just scan the internet and show me everything that Bill posted in the last week and tell me how that's changed from what he used to post, and
Mhm.
has he had an insight lately or something that would be of interest to me. Tremendously valuable.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I mean that's this idea around AI enhanced research. And honestly, I mean, I use this in my own my own business as I'm researching different topics around AI and CX and other, technologies, that it is much easier to go to a Perplexity or Claude or, one of the other chatbots and ask questions that can lead you to that, to a different collection of information than you could easily get if you just went to Google, or if you went, I don't know, where else would you go? Is there another search engine? No, I guess not. Um, I'm sorry, DuckDuckGo, I should mention them too. But I mean, that's, that you're right. That in itself is a big opportunity. But I think if you step back at the beginning all the way through and think of it as, where are the different places? We're not here to talk that much about marketing, but I mean, but there are things that happen in marketing that are certainly, useful, that feed into and help you, be more successful, just like there are places across the sales cycle that, the sales activities, that there are a bunch of different things you can use, and then some that span the whole process. Um, and one of the things, maybe it would be helpful, because I know the one thing that we have a lot of, there's a lot of kind of hype and perhaps misinformation about what agentic AI is and isn't. So maybe I can set a little foundation there, because this was one of the things that I spent a good bit of time at the beginning of the book trying to make sure I could explain. And then I also, I did some of those, like, here are the, here's misinformation and here's the truth. And one of those was, and I hear this a lot from people, oh, well, this thing that this vendor's calling agentic isn't agentic because it's not fully autonomous. And that's a misperception. The idea is that you have an agent that has the capability to have some level of autonomy or agency, and you apply them to use cases. Now, in some use cases, I don't want them to have autonomy. In some use cases, I want them to just do a certain thing, look up a thing, bring me stuff, whatever. So if as long as the agent has the capability, it should be thought of as agentic. And when I say agentic, it's really for simple things that are fairly complex. One is the agent has to be able to perceive its environment through various forms. I mean, everything from just simple data input to computer vision. I mean, it could be a combination of all of those things. It has to be able to plan or decide what kind of actions it could take to get to the goal, and that it is goal oriented, which is important to note. Then it has to be able to execute those actions with either no human or limited human intervention. And then it should learn from that so that once it does this again, it improves its performance to goal as it iterates across those. So those four things: perceive, decide, act, learn, are really critical to understanding agentic in my book, literally.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. I think that is probably the biggest point of confusion is people think that, well, I'm not going to even look at agentic because it's too risky because it's just this automated thing that does stuff. Um, and then, like you said, it's a use case by use case thing. So
Yeah,
there's certainly there's things you don't want it doing without some human insight and or
yeah,
oversight. And
yep,
the other thing that is an actual concern, but it's not any more of a concern other than the fact that agentic AI could work faster than things happen without it, is data quality. So we're still bound
mm,
by the stuff we've always been bound by since the beginning of machine learning, which is, if I don't have the data, then I can't make a good decision or a good prediction or a good this or good that. And so, the when the rubber hits the road, it might be that we as a corporation don't do some things like maybe we don't do meeting transcription, or maybe we're not in, like, if we're calling on the government, we might not be able to do that, or in some cases like Goldman Sachs won't let us do it, but Bank of America will, or whatever. And so you've got this sort of Swiss cheese environment from a data standpoint where we can't say that all accounts and all deals and all conversations have the same level of data quality to them, or data depth, or whatever. And so you're already in this position of, well, we can't just say that we're always going to treat X, Y, and Z the same way, because
yeah.
we're still back to this issue of data. um
Yeah, no, you're right, and the thing is, like, we've talked about this for years, right? That the data in the Salesforce automation system, particularly, has never really had high quality. And the other thing, of course, with all the different sales tools that we've seen over the last 10 years, 15 years, is that you've got data siloed all over the place. So, you started to see movement around, well, for example, Salesforce buying Informatica. I mean, they have a lot of data automation tools, quality management, maintenance tools, and that's really important. The automation's going to be, that's going to be one of the, I didn't put this in, but that's actually one of the big use cases for agentic AI is data quality and maintaining data quality. And I think that's something that we miss. And in fact, one of our friends who actually just did my Disambiguation podcast last week, I think, is at a company called 180 Ops, and they're they're actually looking very heavily at how do we automate and solve a lot of this data quality issue so that we can do more of these type of agentic use cases that will add a lot of value to sales.
yeah, well, that this SpotLogic is sort of focused on that, a similar kind of
Mhm.
thing in terms of being a contextualization engine. And the other thing is we're sort of this time series mechanism, so that we can see how the truth evolves. So there's no such thing as truth in an analog data scenario, right? We're not taking facts. We're taking, well, how does one stakeholder look at this aspect of the problem versus another stakeholder versus another, and we're making sort of all these micro decisions on the decision variables first, which allows us to then make this larger thing. So that's looking at the sale from wearing the customer lens. as
Mhm.
opposed to the seller lens, which I think is another break that you enable from the traditional linear sales process.
Yeah.
Um, so, do you have like a sense for um, the highest value aspects of these uh, AI augmentations, or is it too early to tell?
Well, I'll give you a couple examples, and then we can talk about it a little more. But I think that so right now, you can apply agentic AI. You can go all the way to automation. Certainly. Now, I would be very careful about what I would assume could be completely autonomous and need some sort of human, intervention or interaction or collaboration or whatever, wherever that use case might lead you to. So that's a little bit of a caveat. We're growing, we're emerging. I mean, what have we been talking about agentic AI for a year? So, we've made a lot of progress, but it's not ready to just take over and run your whole business and you go play golf. I mean, that sounds good, but I don't think that's going to happen yet. I mean, someday maybe, but the point is you're thinking about it, and the title of the book was on purpose, right? A digital workforce. Think about it as a digital workforce. Think about you're bringing collaborators into your processes. You have to have a process, and you have to have a process that works, or it doesn't matter how much you automate it. You automate a bad process, it's just going to fail faster, I guess. So that's a key kind of undertaking. But if you look at this, a few places that we and some of this is not even really agentic. It is agentic in that the agent is using some tools, but the tools actually been around for a while, like deal risk assessment, for example. That's really a machine learning model, and it has other inputs, and you have to have good quality data. And I guess we should probably say that as a caveat to any of the things I say here. If you can't get the data quality right, none of the rest of these things are going to work. And in fact, even your information model, from SpotLogic, the idea around an information model, which I love that term. I think that really does say that's what the salesperson is trying to do. They're trying to figure out and fill out an information model that shows them what the customer's trying to do, where their pain points are, and how you could add value. Or maybe you can't add value, right? I mean, that's the other piece. Maybe your solution's not the solution to their problem. And as a good, salesperson that is trying to build value and trust, being able to go, this won't solve your problem is probably as important in the marketplace as saying it will. And
Absolutely.
that's a hard one. That's a hard one, I
Well,
know, but
customers are going to figure that out,
they are. Yeah.
and but you're going to spend 6 months telling your boss that you're going to get this deal, and then he's not going to think too highly of you. But the other I just had this thought about deal risk assessment this morning. So I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, and last night they had like one of the greatest comebacks ever. And of course, you always see these next gen stats getting thrown up on ESPN or whatever you're watching your game on all the time, and most of it is just worthless. Like that tells me nothing. Like I got nothing out of that. But last night they found one that I thought was really interesting, which is the Buffalo Bills win probability was 1.1% with 8 minutes and 37 seconds remaining in the fourth quarter, and they were down 40-25. And then the next part was this was the most improbable comeback over the last decade, and so they won, right? So in the case of the Buffalo Bills, I would say it sort of comes down to the players as opposed to the statistics, right? But it's not that that probability was wrong. It's just that if I have a deal with that, I think that a like this predictor is telling me is not going to happen, but my best guy is on it.
Mm.
Best guys tend to win deals that nobody else can, and so you've got to take sort of this prediction thing with a grain of salt. And I think that there's better uses for it. For example, this information model idea. What information is really critical to these buyers, and do they agree on what information is really critical, and like starting to understand the sort of the theory of mind behind these deals.
Mhm.
The mind of the customer is, I think, the next battleground for salespeople, and especially if you don't have to do um, pitching the product to the same degree that we used to. There's better things you can be doing. It's generally the case that when you go call on a customer, they know more about the product than you do to begin with.
Right.
And what they're really looking for is a partner to help them with the edge cases and so on.
Yeah.
And so the conversation needs to be focused there. But capturing those things that the customer asks is something that if
Mhm.
your meeting is being um, uh, recorded and transcribed, that's something that the company can now sort of vacuum in that they couldn't before.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's interesting. So if you take deal risk assessment, because this is something that's been around for a long time, but it's evolved quite a bit. So in an old forecasting model, if you had 50% accuracy, 50 to 60% accuracy, that's pretty good. Like that, I think most people would be pretty happy
Right.
if your
Which is
forecast
a
was fifty
coin.
percent accurate, right? But if you look at today's systems, and think about how this works. So it works through a sales assistant or whatever you want to call it, right? You've got this interactive agent that works with your salesperson to help them evaluate things. One of those is this deal risk assessment. And so it's reaching out to tools like that old machine learning model that, we've now built up to take real-time data, and, in some cases 300 or more data signals per deal, and it does that same analysis. And now we're looking at accuracy rates that are somewhere between 80 and 90%. And I don't know about you, but I'd be really happy if my sales team came to me with, an accuracy rate of 90%. I mean,
Oh, for
that's
sure.
amazing. Well, I mean, 80% would be pretty dang good, but yeah. And because of that, it looks at all sorts of things like engagement signals, behavior patterns, behavioral analysis. There's even, large language models that are focused around behavioral analysis called large behavior models, conversation analysis, sales cycle metrics. There's all these different signals that you can bring in, social signals that give you behavioral data. That all those things can really be used by these tools in and your digital worker, and your digital worker then is giving that salesperson assistance by helping them understand where to focus. And if I have one deal that's 90% probability and one that's 3%, I know where I need to spend my time. But in the past, that might not necessarily have been the case
Well,
because I probably didn't know.
just to tie all that back to your slide here, I mean, all what you're talking about is what information do we have, right? And
Yeah.
that comes from
Yeah.
discovery,
Yep.
right? So if I'm there pitching a product versus trying to understand, a specific topic or two, then I'm not doing the things that allow me to
Yeah.
put myself into a competitive position.
Yeah, and if you think of discovery, that's a good one to think about the way that AI starts to, provide ways to make that work better. I mean, we know that it's a series of things I don't know that I'm trying to figure out, and it's a series of things I do know that I need to know that I know. So those things are important. But if you add in this capability, I mean, the simplest one you mentioned research before, like AI enhanced research. If you're using an agent that is optimized to do online research about a prospect, you can get a much more complete picture than you ever would have before. Or let's take those call transcripts that we've had for quite a while that weren't particularly useful, in my opinion, anyway. And we can now apply an agent to them that can, in fact, find actionable intelligence in those call transcripts, but even more so, they can be in the call and give you coaching as you're in the call behind the scenes so that you've got a digital worker, a companion that's collaborating with you to help you be better because that agent can look at way more data than the salesperson ever could and provide you in call feedback to help you know where to hone in and where to move away from real time, which is significant. All of those things. I mean, stakeholder mapping. How do I know who does what, who's really making the decision, and even down to competitive analysis. I mean, there's, in the past, there are ways you could build this, but it was very static, right? It's like if I'm going against competitor A, here are the five things I should probably try to plant because it'll it'll cause them to implode if they have to do it or something, right? But now we're talking about real-time competitive analysis that can aggregate way more data and provide you with real-time insight into, you do this better than them, you don't do this better than them, you need to, fill out the solution a different way, or whatever, right?
Yeah, so really what you're talking about is sort of a sales strategy that is focused on a specific deal, the variables of this deal. And that's something that sort of top-down approaches just can't do. So we're talking
Mhm.
about a sea change in terms of sales strategy from top down to bottom up. It doesn't mean you have to start with nothing, but um, s- well, I'll just give you another example that just um, to show where AI can add value in a way that I couldn't have imagined a couple of years ago. Just back to your 68% example of buyers don't call a seller until they've made a decision. So so what would the salesperson's strategy be if they got called in to a customer who feels like they've already made a decision? So the salesperson's now in a position where they have to re-engineer a sale as
Mhm.
opposed to start from the beginning and try and catch up to the customer whose buyer journey is almost complete.
Yeah.
And so I asked GPT to give me a strategy, and the discovery questions I'd have to ask for each aspect of that strategy
Mhm.
to a ascertain whether this buyer would is even willing to help me understand how they came to the conclusion they came to, if especially if they think that I'm one of the lesser alternatives that they have, so I can decide whether I even want to engage with this person, because I don't want to just give them a price for their procurement so they can buy some competitive equipment. I'll just move on to
Mhm.
somebody who wants to engage with me earlier in their buying process. But
Yeah.
anyways, but so GPT gave me a fantastic set four strategy elements and the questions that go with them. And in my case, I just plugged that into SpotLogic, and now I've got this information model that is a strategy every time I'm in that situation. And so we've got this potential for a content explosion. The more people doing that and
Mhm.
loading that into the system gets smarter very, very rapidly. I mean, Dell's got
Mhm.
40,000 direct salespeople. Imagine if each one of them contributed one thing a month. You've got a whole other set of jobs now, just managing the intelligence that we're gathering that we've never
Yeah.
gathered before, and it has to do with these buyer
Yeah.
seller dynamics and
Yep.
the decision making dynamics and so on.
Yeah, and I mean, those are perfect use cases for, involving AI in the process. So, I have data that grows exponentially. I need to be able to interpret that data in specific ways and answer specific questions. So if I'm a salesperson and I have an agent that works with me as a collaborator on my sales process, that can help me dig through all of that and find the important bits of information, like, how would I establish value with this client? What kind of insights can I share that show that I have value? What can I use from public facing reviews on the product to help me know where I have strengths and where I have weaknesses that I need to work on? I mean, there are all those things that you could do, but you couldn't in the past, because you needed too much effort to get to the data. You need it, and assuming the data is right, which, as we said, that's a big assumption. And then, interpret that data in a way that helps you take action. We had next best action kind of recommendations in a very rote way, using very simple algorithms in the past, and those were, pretty much like, gee, whenever I order a, a a hamburger, I get fries with it, so offer them fries. I mean, it wasn't that complex, but instead, it might go, "Hey, this person, it always wants a pickle on their hamburger, so offer them an upgrade to a pickle." I mean, whatever. But, the point is that it gives you insights that you wouldn't be able to get to on your own, so it can, in fact, help you get to the outcome that you're looking for. Now, I don't I mean, I should say, "Oh, yeah, AI is gonna replace salespeople." That would get you all excited, but I don't believe that, and I don't believe that in complex sales. Now in simple sales, I do believe I should be able to pull up to Starbucks and interact with an agent and get my coffee the way I want it without having to deal with a person. Not because I don't like the people there, it's fine, but it's just more efficient if I do it
Right.
that way, and then I have more people inside making the drinks, which is where they get bogged down, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so that's, commodity versus complex is the difference there.
And maybe we've got time for one more quick question.
Sure.
How do you see, because you were kind of nipping at it there, that this is going to affect like go to market in general.
Mhm,
And so, marketing is going to be changing, sales is
mhm.
going to be changing, product management's going to be changing. Like all of these things are interconnected, and
Yeah.
as you change one, it's going to change the other ones potentially. So, what's your 30,000 foot view of sort of the next 12 months
Sure.
of how go to market's going to evolve?
Well, one fundamental thing that I should add into this, because this has been kicked around for years, that the fact that go to market is this one continuous effort inside of a company, not all these different silos, and that's been one of the biggest issues all along. Is that sales is going, marketing, you gave me bad leads, and marketing is going, I gave you good leads that you didn't follow up on, and and then it gets a bad handoff to customer success, and they're all angry because you sold them something that didn't solve the problem, or whatever. So the idea of the continuous process is important, and the more we can move to a hybrid workforce that has digital workers doing the things they're good at, and people doing the things, humans doing the things they're good at, and then working together on things that they're both good at, the better off we are. So if you think about that over the next 12-24 months, I think, if you start to think about this augmented sales intelligence, so I can start to build out, we have autonomous agents that provide me valuable insights as I go through the process, because it can analyze much more data in real time. And then you get, real time sales intelligence. You start to see the idea of AI sitting across the top and unifying things that have been separate systems in the past, because maybe you don't need to replace your financials right now, because that would be a huge effort. But maybe I could put an AI layer over the top of it that keeps my salespeople informed of what transactions have been done with this client in real time, and lets me then have a better conversation or something like that. Right. So the idea, more and more of this combined hybrid workforce, and then also around the area of, what do customers tell you they really want? They want things that are contextual and relevant to them. If you contact them with that kind of information, they have a positive reaction to you. Well, if I could actually, with good probability, know what those things are, and know when it is contextual, when it is relevant to you, and what's relevant to you, I can start to improve, augment the sales team so that it is a hybrid team going to market, and it can be much more effective. And I think that's what you're going to see more and more is this blended use of a workforce that has digital elements and human elements.
So is that going to change? It seems like it's going to change the job of the sales manager and get them back to some of the things that they used to be doing before we were chasing CRM data all the
Mhm.
time. It seems like it's going to affect um, uh, sales success or customer success in
Mhm.
that you can't bolt customer satisfaction onto the back of a bad
Mhm.
decision, right? So seems like with your approach, the salesperson is getting the guidance they need to ensure that the customer gets the
Yeah.
solution that they need, so that we're not trying to bolt on customer satisfaction at the
Yeah.
end of this thing. We're
Yeah,
building
that
it.
that's absolutely right. Yeah, you build it in. And the thing is, if you start all the way at marketing, and marketing's done a pretty good job of using some of these tools already. And so they kind of led adoption in some ways. Customer success has been pretty successful with autonomous chatbots and interactions and that sort of thing. So let's just tie everything together, hyper personalized, contextual, relevant, all the way from the marketing material through the customer success team. Then you're talking about a situation where you're going to, dramatically improve satisfaction because you are understanding, you're building trust, adding value, and you're adding continuous value over the life of that relationship. So that whole thing tied together with a hybrid workforce could do something that we've been trying to do forever, but we did it in little broken pieces. Now we need to think of it in a continuous way.
And the other thing that I see is that, so if the annual turnover in tech sales in particular is 35% or more, then every year 1/3 of your sales organization is new employees.
Hmm.
And so you almost have to have some level of automation that you haven't had in the past to
Yep.
just make these people effective in the
Yep.
next calendar year. Like we can't wait for some organic approach to um, me acquiring the skills I need to be successful here.
Yeah.
We've got to find a way to leapfrog
Yeah. Well, and I
the
would say, if you take this and you start to think about, we used to, used to last year, last year we used to think of
way back last
augmenting
year.
way back last year. We used to think of augmenting the sales team with a co-pilot, right? So we had assistants, they could help you find stuff when you couldn't find it, information or whatever. But instead of thinking about it as augmentation, we have to think about it as the active, co-evolving collaboration between AI, seller, and buyer. And that, if you tie that together, unlocking data-driven creativity, adaptability, and will drive revenue growth with, in an unprecedented way, to use a favorite term of my one of my chatbots. It's unprecedented, but it is unprecedented because we've never been able to tie these things together that way and really meet the right customer at the right time with the right thing, and understand that as a company, and continue to build that. So to me, that's a huge opportunity.
Yep, yep, absolutely. Well, it's not even an opportunity so much as is like, how could you justify not doing that? I think
Right.
we're at an inflection point where um, we
Yeah.
we just can't do it the old way and keep up with the speed of the
Mm-mm.
treadmill that we're currently on.
Yeah. Well, and as a competitive advantages can also be competitive disadvantages if you don't take advantage of them, right?
Right, right,
And that's exactly what we're seeing is you're starting to see. And I didn't use this number, but in the survey I did for the book, 90, almost 90, it was 89.1% of the surveyed executives, and they were in the US, said that they were already involved in something with agentic AI. It could be a planning phase or a pilot or proof of concept all the way through deployment. But actually, almost 50% of them had already had active production level usable deployments. So that's a significantly further reach than what I think most people would guess today if they had to say who's
for
actually
sure.
using this, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Well, I think that's all the time we've got today, Michael. Thank you very much. You of course survived the hot seat. For our listeners, if you think you have what it takes to survive the hot seat, let us know. We'd love to hear from you. That's your episode for today. Thanks so much for being with us this week. Tune in next time for different faces, different topics, and different perspectives as we put someone different into the hot seat. Thanks.
Thanks. And that's the show for this weekend. Hopefully, you got a lot out of that, enjoyed it. Definitely check out the book, check out the website, your digitalworkforce.com. didn't come out that great. Yourdigitalworkforce.com, and the book Building the Digital Workforce: Strategies for Agentic AI Success. So look forward to next week, and thanks for joining. And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arianresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arianresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arian Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.